prime ministers there's been in England, or so even in my tenure as CEO. So at the end of the day, you run the company the right way, and what we're trying to say is get us to a rational regulatory structure that and have it stick to the ribs. If you keep swinging like this, our clients can't depend on us when they need us.
So who are you going to call? He's with me right now, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior U.S. Policy Analyst. Not Ghostbusters, Nathan Dean. Great to see you, sir. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to go through all of this stuff. Let's start with Moynihan. Really interesting to hear him talk about the pendulum and reminding us that this bank has been around since George Washington. What does Trump mean for a titan of finance like this?
Well, I think what Brian Moynihan was referring to is this idea of more capital, but less capital. I mean, Dodd-Frank's been around since 2010, and they've spent the last 15 years implementing it. It's only about 75% implemented, but the big stuff is there.
Yep.
And if you get to this idea where a Democratic president comes in and all of a sudden bank capital goes up dramatically, Republican president comes in, bank capital goes down, it's very hard for banks to prepare for the long term. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I hear that comment, I think of what bank lobbyists will be pushing the Fed and the OCC to do. And for me, that is almost capital neutral. And so we go back to this idea of the Basel III endgame. And look, there are people in Washington that want to see the Basel III endgame go away. But I also think that there are a lot of folks in New York who want to see a Basel III endgame come in and be capital neutral. So I think what will happen with capital regulations over the next year is you're going to hit pause. The regulators are going to try and figure it out. Maybe Jerome Powell does something at the Fed. Maybe he doesn't. Mm-hmm. Doge is obviously playing a very important picture here. But I think for the long term, I think you're going to see more of a capital neutral policy emerging from the bank regulators over the next few years.
Okay. Now I'm quoting Ray Parker Jr. Because your phone is ringing and you are the guy to call. What are clients who have terminals and who are investing on this information asking you about this right now?
Well, obviously, crypto is a big piece because of the cryptocurrency news.
Sure.
I mean, we saw that Bitcoin has gone down, Trump coin, Melania coin, a lot.
Are they even asking you about Basel anymore? I mean, this conversation has changed a lot.
Not so much. I mean, the bank regulators, and I think a lot of bank investors have sentiment that deregulation is coming, but they understand now that deregulation is not a magic wand. It's going to take a long time. And so I think from what our clients are talking about is what are the actionable things that are coming out over the next few weeks and months? Obviously, tariffs. President Trump just reiterated today that Canada and Mexico tariffs are coming next week. Yeah. Reciprocal tariffs could come even later. The State of the Union. I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming up, but I think in terms of this week, it's the House reconciliation bill. Will that pass tonight? Will it not?
Will there even be a vote?
Will there even be a vote? And then this idea of tariffs and then crypto. Those are the three things I think our clients are really talking about.
Let's tick through them. Do you think a vote is coming, or does Mike Johnson have more herding of cats to do?
I don't. I think there's more herding of cats. Yeah. I don't think a vote's going to happen tonight. Could be wrong, but Speaker Johnson can only afford to lose one, and there's no deadline here.
Correct.
I mean, that's the thing is that he can push this deadline back, and there's no penalty. So what does Washington often do when they do in these situations? They kick the can and they push it down. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, the Senate's going to be sitting there. Senator Thune's going to say, "Look, if you can't get your act together, we have Plan B or Plan A, depending who you talk to in terms of the reconciliation." Mm-hmm. But we're telling our clients is that this vote is more of just this vote is just the vote to kick off the process.
You're right.
This isn't the vote that actually has Medicaid cuts, SNAP cuts, tax changes.
So if it's this hard already, that shouldn't really encourage them, should
exactly,
it?
Which goes to our theory that, we do think tax changes and we do think a reconciliation bill with a multi-trillion-dollar price tag with economic benefits and so forth will pass this year. But we've always said it's going to be in the latter half of the year, potentially even the fourth quarter. So nothing has to happen this week. So don't be surprised if they kick the can. Now, I also think that Speaker Johnson could eventually get a budget resolution through, but it just may not be this one.
Got it. There is a deadline coming, and that's a funding deadline, middle of next month. When do you start running odds on a shutdown, or are you already there?
So we're going to have our odds out next week. Okay. Right now, there's a lot of rhetoric, and the rhetoric will increase as we get to March 14th. Sure. That's anticipated. Yeah. Now, the question here is Doge, because the Democrats obviously are not thrilled with what's happening with the Doge committee. And my question, though, is how are they going to respond to this in terms of a shutdown? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think they can get to a top-line number. I think there's going to be a short-term CR that comes out of this. But my question is, how much fight are the Democrats going to put up on this? Because if the Republicans come back and say, here's a clean bill, can the Democrats come back and say, we're going to block this because of Doge? I'm not exactly sure yet. We're going to be we're going to be having a lot of internal discussions this week, and we'll have our odds out for you next week.
Yeah, well, I can't wait. That says something, by the way, when you get to the point. That's like when a champagne house decides to declare a vintage. When you guys say we're running a countdown clock, that means it's kind of getting real, right? There are so-called shutdown threats you don't do odds on.
Well, I mean,
BI.
this is a serious opportunity here for
Okay.
a shutdown. And
That's what I mean, though. That's different than the last couple times.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever, sometimes we've had this conversation when I say, don't worry about it. It's not gonna happen, or we really don't care. This is different because we do think that there is going to be a significant shutdown sometime in 2025. I'm just not sure this is the one.
Wow, a significant shutdown. Because you've got the debt ceiling in mind.
We have the debt ceiling coming, and we have political parties that are already thinking about 2026. And when political parties go into shutdowns thinking that they're the ones that are politically advantageous to their positions, that's when you get a shutdown.
What's significant? Weeks?
I think, President Trump had the 31-day shutdown.
Yeah, that was significant.
I had a client ask me this morning, are we going to get a 2-month shutdown?
Wow.
So I guess that's one of the big questions.
Trump would want a record breaking, right? If we're going to do it, we're going to set a record. It's very, very Trumpy.
When it comes to shutdowns in particular, it's always the American people putting pressure on politicians to come to an agreement.
Yeah.
Whether it's children trying to go to the zoo here in D.C. or national monuments. You may recall a couple of years ago, World War II vets stormed the memorial and broke down the barrier. They're the ones that put pressure on Washington to end the shutdown. It's just, where does that pressure go? Does it go to the Democrats or to the Republicans? And we're still trying to figure that out.
Okay, fascinating. You mentioned crypto. What's going on here? Bitcoin falling out of bed, 86,000, and don't even mention, you mentioned some of the meme coins. That's a disaster area depending on the coin you're looking at. What are the influences here when it's risk on, risk off? Is this a hedge or not?
So there's really two aspects to this. You have to separate Bitcoin and then the meme coins.
Fair. Start with Bitcoin.
When it comes to Bitcoin, we saw the price go from 100,000 down to around 86. I think Charlie just said.
Yeah.
A lot of this is driven by the macroeconomic environment. We're seeing a lot of, in our earnings calls across Bloomberg Intelligence, a lot of our analysts are reporting back that things aren't looking so rosy in the economic front. And Bitcoin could be another example of that. The tariff policy in particular, whether that increases costs or leads to dramatic job cuts in certain industries, the question here, though, is Bitcoin has always been seen as a risk-saving or at least a risk-aversion asset.
Right. So isn't this the time to buy it? If you're worried about the dollar, if you're worried about the direction of the economy, if you're worried about tariffs, wouldn't you buy Bitcoin?
But that's the thing, is that a lot of this is driven by the global economic order. Bitcoin is not a U.S.-specific coin. It's a global coin. And so I think there's a lot of uncertainty and people just don't know. I mean, Bitcoin's only been around for a couple of years. It doesn't have 50, 70, 100 years of trading like gold does. Right, yeah. And so I think a lot of Bitcoin investors who are also mostly retail in nature are still trying to figure out, how does this work? And, we're just going to have to see how it plays out over the next few weeks.
This is fascinating to me. I'm looking at Melania coin. This would be the opposite of Bitcoin. Now we're into the meme coins. Some would call them other things. I think Patrick McHenry suggested there might be a name you can't use on the air. They're S coins. This thing topped out at like $9. It is worth 94 cents right now, down 88%. What's going on there? Are we giving up on this idea?
Well, meme coins are meme coins. They're speculative coins that people want to get in early, make their dollars, and then get out. And so, the meme coin argument has always been interesting here in the policy space because if you talk to a lot of crypto advocates in Washington and you give them truth serum, they'll probably say that the meme coins are absolutely horrid for this argument. Because look, when you go to Congress or you go to the Securities and Exchange Commission, you say, we are a serious industry, we want rules and regulations, and then you have a meme coin comes out and says, we're going to take all of our dollars and get all of our gains within the first 3 to 4 days and then watch it go back down to zero. That's an unserious nature to a serious question. So I think when it comes to the meme coins, a lot of people in the crypto world would prefer if they just went away and then you focus on the big five instead.
The Trump family doesn't seem to agree, though.
Well, but
they've been launching coins like they're going out of style, right?
But crypto. I think there was a lot of anticipation that President Trump was going to be inaugurated, and then you were going to get crypto policy. I mean, they had the crypto czar. You had a lot of discussions, and look, you are getting a lot of positive momentum out of the SEC crypto task force. Paul Atkins, when he's confirmed, the CFTC, when Brian contends, if he's confirmed as we anticipate, you're going to have a crypto advocate at the helm of the CFTC. But it takes time. Washington doesn't move that quickly. There's no magic wand. And so when it comes to crypto policy in particular, you have to think about it in terms of 18 months to 2 years, not within the first 100 days, which I think a lot of crypto advocates were thinking.
So is the big question you get then from crypto investors, when's the regulation, when's the framework?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw the stablecoin bills come out, the Genius Act and the Stable Act. There was another one from the House Financial Services Committee ranking member Maxine Waters.
What do you tell them about it? Something comprehensive, another fit. When do we actually get some clarity on that this year?
I'd say the earliest would be the end of this year, more likely the beginning of next year.
Fascinating. Now we'll be watching, I guess, these prices in the meantime. If you're listening to Nathan Dean, you just got your deep dive there from the senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. People pay a lot of money for this advice, and it means a lot to us to have you here, as always. With apologies to Ray Parker Jr., Nathan Dean, thank you so much. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Balance of Power. When do we get the BOP coin? Are you working on that, James? I didn't even